mention to you first that one of our speakers is Megan McKieran, a native of Seattle, and she's lived and worked in the Hallow Lake community since 1987. She's a retired design professional and publicist, and an artist, an activist in the climate justice tree advocacy movement. Welcome, Megan, and could you come up, please?
Thank you, Randy. Oh, it's good to be here again. I think I was here presenting about 13 years ago, something entirely different. Thank you. I really want to thank the board of Hallow Lake Community Club for seeding this kind of precious time. It's the first members meeting of the year, and there was a little competition for this spot. So anyway, we recognize that this is quite an opportunity to gather people, so thank you so much. And tonight, I am not the main presenter. I am so happy to present members of the Trees and People Coalition, who are sponsoring this event in partnership with Tree Action Seattle. And we have members of both groups here, and we'll be hearing from just about everybody, one way or another. We'll have a Q&A at the end, and you all have index cards on your chairs, and there's more here and pens. So along the way, as you have questions, maybe just write them down, and you'll hear more about collecting them later, but we really hope to answer lots of questions. These two groups formed only this past year, really in the last 6 to 7 months, in response to the alarming rate of tree loss that Seattle is currently experiencing. And I think the numbers are 1,700 trees just between January and October of 2023, with many more slated for removal. So the question is, why? Why are we cutting down Seattle's climate mitigating urban forest? So we're going to be talking about that tonight, how our native mature trees can help us adapt to and mitigate climate change in our city. Now that we are, 5th on the list of cities with heat island, what is the statistic? Number 5
Yeah.
heat islands. So we'll talk about that, why that is happening, and what we can do about it. There's literature on the tables you might have found by now, and along with sign-up sheets. So that will be our way to stay in touch with you about what is happening, what we can do, how you might choose to participate in actions that are sponsored by these organizations and others. And we have along the way, we have Plant Amnesty, Tree Pack, and Don't Clear Cut Seattle have been long at work in this arena. So all of us together are working on finding our way to be branches of the same tree, saving them. You know, I imagine most of you are here because of some relationship that you have with trees. Either you're a property owner with trees that you love in your yard, or you grew up with them, playing under them, or your children love them. I have a question that I have borrowed from somebody who's in the room who I won't name, but she wrote a beautiful short piece. She asked this question: have you ever named a tree? Let me see what's behind me here. Yeah, there's one that got named. Because, and I asked this question, it's a little dark here, and with cataracts it's a little hard to read. And I'm not a real practiced public speaker, so here we go. We name what we love and what we have a relationship with. And this tree behind me came to be known as Luma, the Wedgwood cedar. which community members rallied around this last summer and ultimately saved. And it's a beautiful long story that I won't tell here. But out of that came more, really the effort there was to try to restore tree protections in Seattle and just find a better balance between development and nature. So, in our tree advocacy movement, there are many ways that people can contribute. We can plant trees and cultivate them, preserve existing trees, engage in the political realm, work to affect housing policy, and I want to name Iskra Johnson here as one who has been, Iskra, would you raise your hand? All right, I'm pointing her out because we may want to ask her questions later. So one of you may have a question for her. She's been working at the intersection of housing politics and tree preservation for a long time. Longtime activist in the areas of both rural land preservation and neighborhood preservation. So remember Iskra. And another person, David, is at the back. He's easy to see. David Mooring is a member of the Trees and People Coalition, and he is also a former Seattle Urban Forestry Commissioner. He has 35 years of experience as an architect and a resident in Seattle's multifamily community. David believes in both additional housing density opportunities and the urban forest as a key to our climate resiliency. So he is sharing with us tonight a short demonstration in the back, and this is an example, you guys, that hits very close to home here. It's at 130th Northeast, and David's information conveys how we can achieve creative site design, and the added, let's see, what did he say? I'm going to read his words. We can achieve, there went that line. David will tell you himself, perhaps.
We're going to speak about it later too. So.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that later, so I'll stop there. Perfect. I was done. And introduce the beautiful Julia Shetler. Julia and Sandy Shetler are going to introduce themselves to you and also take the presentation away. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going first. Hi everyone, my name is Julia. I'm a volunteer with Tree Action Seattle and also Trees and People. I'll be starting us off, and I'm going to try to train, no, this is just I'm going to talk like this. Yeah, no, that's fine. Can you go to the next slide? Yeah. Okay, so we're going to be talking about how to save Seattle's majestic urban forest. There are numerous reasons why we need to save it. Everyone knows that trees are good. I'm sure in your head, if you can picture a tree that you absolutely love, and then think about all of the benefits that it's providing you, and maybe some you didn't even know. So trees are good for carbon removal, they're good in carbon sequestration, and they're one of the only scalable forms of carbon sequestration our planet has. Trees provide heat mitigation, which is really critical in Seattle because we're top 5 for urban heat islands, for growing urban heat islands, as we mentioned earlier. And so we really need our trees in this city specifically. Trees are good for human health. There's tons of statistics about why we need trees. There's higher infant birth rates when people live near trees, lower risks of asthma, good mental health impacts. So there's a lot of public health reasons why we need to keep our trees. Trees prevent flood and landslide mitigation, or they cause flood and landslide mitigation. They're good for habitat, for critical habitat for wildlife, some which are endangered or threatened. They bring community, just like this community here. So we know we need our trees. And we know that mature trees are even better. So mature trees sequester 2.5 times the amount of carbon that baby trees do, and that's 2.5 times per square inch. So there's double the benefit of having mature trees, because not only are they bigger than small trees, so they're going to sequester more carbon, but they're also more efficient than small trees as well. Oh, do you want to go back there? There are a few more.
Oh, sure, sorry.
You're fine. They're good for critical native habitat and urban wildlife, so they provide more habitat, of course. They're good for cooling and filtration, and they're also a mother to smaller trees, and so they take care of smaller trees. We can't build up baby trees if we don't have big trees in the first place. Great. Do you want to take this one, or I can? Yeah.
Okay, this is, instead of Houston, we have a problem. It's Seattle, we have a problem. And we basically have...
I'm going to just take it off.
I'm too short.
Here we go.
Okay, thank you.
That solves a lot of problems.
Okay, great. Yeah, so basically, Seattle is losing about 4,000 mature trees every year. The city doesn't aggregate that data, so we've collected it from different sources. In July of 2023, we decided to do a study on pulling our own data on how many trees were being removed. So this slide is an example of just 1 month, July of 2023, and we figured out how many trees were removed, how many were of the very large protected size. At that time, the protected size was 30 inches, so of diameter, so we lost 11 of our very large trees that month. And then you can see that the tree loss is spread across the city throughout every neighborhood. And then we say tree preservation is climate justice. So we plotted those July 2023 removals. I'm sorry for where I'm standing. Anyway, I'll leave if you want me to. We plotted them on a city map. The darker dots are the larger trees. And we know, not just in Seattle, but really in all urban areas, it's been validated over and over, trees equal wealth. So neighborhoods with fewer trees are generally poorer neighborhoods, and trees also equal health. So health, wealth, and trees all go together. The center area, there's very few trees, South Park, Georgetown, South Beacon Hill, but even in those neighborhoods, we're losing some trees. And one of the things that we emphasize is that people need trees right where they live, shading their homes. Having them in parks is not good during a heat wave. So I can't see either. I'm doing this from memory because I can't see my notes. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so next slide. We're getting used to all this fancy new equipment. We usually just yell. Okay. Okay. This is a similar map of to the one that I just showed you, but this was done by King County in 2021. It's called the King County Heat Mapping Project, and they drove around to thousands of different points throughout the city, and they measured the temperature. And obviously, the red parts are the hottest parts, and those correlate perfectly with lack of trees. And the average difference between a treed neighborhood and an urban heat island is 13 degrees Fahrenheit. So it really is, when you get to these very hot temperatures, it's the difference between life and death, or life and a very bad heat illness. Yeah. I wanted to talk about the heat islands. Sorry, one more thing. Yeah. So as you've heard us say a couple times, we are ranked 5th nationally for urban heat islands, and it's the way that we're developing, because we don't have a plan. When we rapidly densify areas, we're not accommodating trees that already are there, and we're not making space to plant new ones. So our 2 newest urban heat islands are both affiliated with the light rail in Rainier, when they took out all the trees to put the stop there. And then also Roosevelt is now an urban heat island, and it was not 5 years ago. And as you probably know, there's a lot happening around 145th. So there will likely be a new urban heat island at 145th. So we can switch now.
Sure. Yeah, and we just wanted to touch on housing a little bit further because right now Seattle's solution to our housing affordability crisis is to build more. And that's what they believe is the solution. And we are saying build more, but keep trees where we live. There's an argument that we should only have like swaths of forest and like suburban areas, but keep the middle area very densified. But we know that isn't the solution for all of the reasons we've been saying. Not only, but Tokyo, which is a great example of very packed density, as you can see in that photo right there, they're still one of the least affordable cities in the world, and they have huge urban heat islands because of it. So we know there needs to be an alternative solution. This isn't the way Seattle can be going.
Great. So we're going in the wrong direction, and why? In 2021, Seattle released their Canopy study, where they had used LIDAR, which is a form of what is it?
It's radar technology.
Radar technology. She's an engineer. Anyway, to measure the canopy, they said that we had 28.1% canopy, and that it had fallen from the previous measurement in 2016. One thing to know about that study that you can just tuck away is that it was done at the 8-foot level. So if you have mature rhododendrons in your yard, under the Seattle Canopy study, those are actually the same as Doug firs. So they did not measure forest volume, they only measured at 8 feet off the ground. Anyway, even that study, using that very low bar, found that we had lost trees. So the study concluded in the written conclusion, it said development had little or nothing to do with tree loss. But what we did was we went back into the data that the city had collected on sites. They had sites that were developed and sites that weren't developed. We found that the trees on sites that were developed were 20 times more likely to be removed than a tree on a non-developed lot. So development for trees is almost always fatal. So we've got the answer here as to why we're going in the wrong direction. One is our tree ordinance does not protect trees, and our trees are managed by our city building department. So the tree ordinance was passed, the tree ordinance was passed in May of 2023. It received significant input from the developers. There's a report that you can go onto on the City of Seattle website. It shows all the times that a developer lobbyist or any lobbyist has met with any city official. Developer lobbyists met with city officials in the 6 weeks up to the tree ordinance being released 24 times. That included city council, people in the mayor's office, people within the building department. They met the city officials and the city council met with the Urban Forestry Commission only once. And then the Urban Forestry Commission got a couple of other presentations given to them, but they had virtually no input into the ordinance. So as a result, the ordinance is really not good. It basically the biggest difference is the old ordinance allowed the city planner on a development project to decide whether or not a tree could be worked around. They were allowed to say, hey, this will not save the tree. Can you move this building 6 feet to the west? And that was often how trees were saved. That decision has been removed from the city. With our new tree ordinance, the developer decides whether or not they want to save the trees. And then if they choose to remove the trees, they pay a fee. And the fees range between a few $100s to a few $1,000s. So knowing the profit margins on these projects, we are not confident that any trees will be saved under the new ordinance. I think that's all for that slide. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the second half of the issue we're seeing is a problem with enforcement. Seattle Department of Construction and Inspections regulates trees on private property, which is, I think we estimated like 50% of the trees that are in Seattle, right? So the trees in your backyard, the trees in your home, that accounts for 50%, which is a huge number. And with SDCI regulating them, we tried to investigate, like, why are all these trees being removed then? And we figured that SDCI would be a good place to start. Well, as you can see here, they have a ton of problems. SCCI, we found, routinely approves illegal removals. They alter or contradict records they have about trees, contradicting themselves. They close complaints, so public complaints, without any investigation. So if you saw a tree being removed and you submitted a complaint to the SDCI portal, they would say, hey, this complaint has been fixed, and not do anything about it. And it's happened to me before, and a lot of people here. And then they allow for after-hour illegal tree removal. So if you do see a tree being cut in front of you and you want to call the SDCI complaint line and say, hey, something is happening right now and I know it's illegal, well, if it's at like 7 p.m. on a Thursday, no one's going to come out and that tree's going to be removed because they're not open at that time for their complaint hours. And so it's really just complacency with developers removing trees. And and we have a report to pass around as well about that. Yeah. So, this is our report. It was a year and a half to make to investigate all of these different removals. I think we have around like 20 examples in there of issues that we've seen with SDCI that we've been documenting.
And it's also on our website.
Yeah, and it's also on Tree Action Seattle's website. So feel free to look there if you don't get a chance to dig through it.
On the website? Okay.
Yeah, treeactionseattle.com.
So I just chose this one as a colorful example. It's also in the report. This is what we typically have been finding. This site is in West Seattle. It had 5, we call them at that time exceptional trees. 5 protected trees were on the site. They were documented by the property surveyor, and they were clearly shown on the SDCI portal. The developer removed the trees, except for that one. My friend stopped him halfway through. So anyway, but the trees are gone. When they sent an inspector out, they changed the number and size of trees. So instead of being 5 protected trees, as it clearly showed throughout the records on the portal, they changed it to 3 small trees, no violation. So we have found this kind of thing repeatedly. I have in the report, there's places where we get an email that says there was no violation, yet I file a public records request, and there's all kinds of discussion between the employees about the violation. So it's a real problem, and it's one of the reasons that we are asking. We have a petition out. There's so many things to tell you guys about, but we have a change.org petition. We are asking the city to create, unify all of the urban forestry divisions under one that protects trees, that is not with our building department. Okay, so we're back to Luma. We started with Luma, and here she is again. I think, do people here, does anyone have a question about Luma? Do you know who that is, pretty much? And hands.
Anyone, hands show if you've heard of Luma before this? Hey.
Okay, great. So Luma is the cedar tree in Wedgwood that was declared by the Snoqualmie tribe to have been culturally modified or changed when it was young, to be to show directions on a path, and it's a very large tree. And the reason that we all gathered around Luma is that when this plan that was put out is a perfect example of why we're not saving trees. The lot is a 12,000 square foot lot, super big lot. Instead of shifting the buildings a little bit over to the east to accommodate this very large tree, they wanted to divide the lot in half and use a very inefficient design. I don't know if you can see, but well, I'll show you on another slide. But these buildings are all spread out, and they don't need to be. They can be built together, and trees can be saved. But that was how Luma, that's how we came together to try to save Luma, because she was on the edge of the lot and she was saved. So, okay, this, I want to credit David with this wonderful slide. I've used it so much. This is an example on the left of our current inefficient design, and on the right, what's possible with if we simply make it a priority to save trees on the edge of lots. So both of these are to scale. This is your typical 4,000 to 5,000 square foot city lot. Right now, in the neighborhood residential zone, which most of this area around here is the neighborhood residential zone, which used to be single family, it now allows a single family home and 2 additional accessory dwelling units. Right now, the thing that all the developers are doing is they're spreading them out as far as possible. So you'll see one of them has to be attached. So they'll attach it with just a little tube of wood or a shed or something. But when they do it this way, they can sell each house for more, but they have to take out all the trees because they've pushed the buildings to the edge of the lot. You can have the same number of homes and size of homes and build them efficiently toward the center of the lot and save all the trees. You save 5 times more trees or space to plant new ones if you design efficiently from the beginning. So that's what we're advocating for. And this is particular to the Hallard Lake neighborhood. And this is David's project. He analyzed this site. Does everyone know this site on 133rd and Roosevelt, the corner? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, exactly. And actually 2 trees on that site were illegally removed. The 2 largest trees were illegally removed about 3 months ago, and they got a $5,000 fine. So it doesn't really stop people. But anyway, there are several ways to design this site, but David has shown that if you spread the buildings around a little bit more creatively, you could save almost every tree. This is the one the bad design.
This is current, and those trees are going to be removed.
Yeah, exactly. So all those trees that are red are going to be removed. We don't have David's final we can just say. Yeah.
Yeah.
With a slight redesign of the site, almost all those trees could be saved except for 3. Instead, we're going to remove about 12 to 13 trees. Do you want to? Oh, I love this. Okay. This is where this is the inspiring part. Okay, so this is Bryant Heights. Bryant Heights there were 2 old houses and a commercial site, and Ray Johnston Architects, the builder and his architecture firm wanted to try a project where they saved trees, and they were able to totally max out the site. They built out to the maximum allowed zoning. They put in 82 homes. They saved all of the trees. And they didn't just save the trees, but they actually invested a little bit of money in an arborist, which arborists are not that expensive. So they learned how to build around the trees, because a lot of trees can be built around because their roots might be on one side and you can build close on the other. So it's just a little bit of customization at the beginning. And look at the payback. So these trees were not damaged during construction. So instead of saving a tree and it falls on the new house 5 years later, you actually have a real living healthy forest around your home. So 82 different families or residents are able to enjoy this forest now. And then here's a small example. Again, this is North Seattle. Bragdon Shields is a different architect, and he is he's very pro-tree. and so he literally almost inserted this cottage into this backyard. He did not remove a single tree. It's a spacious, I don't know the exact square feet, I think it's about 1,600 square feet, it might be a little bit more. And the trees are healthy. Again, he hired an arborist at the beginning, but they're really happy with how it turned out. So I think that's it for that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and on the last two slides, I think it's important to mention, those we kind of feel is the future of housing, because the DADUs and housing that's kind of closer together like that in those communities, that's really the direction Seattle's going no matter what. And we're saying we can keep trees with those places. So if you're interested in getting involved further, which I hope you are, we have a few ways to do that. The first is, in general, if you're just interested in reaching out and volunteering with us, go to treesandpeople.org/contact, and you can send a message to the people in the organization, and they'll get back to you, and hopefully we can find a way for you to help volunteer with us some more, because we're trying to grow our numbers. There's a power in numbers. The second way is supporting our legal action to make the tree ordinance actually protect trees. That is with an organization, Seattle Needs Trees. Yeah, do you actually want to speak to this?
Yeah. And so, so that is actually how Trees and People Coalition formed recently, was to support this legal petition to the State Growth Management Hearings Board. Under the Growth Management Act, communities have to stick to their comprehensive plan, and the plan for Seattle is to reach 30% canopy. We're obviously going in the wrong direction, but so we have three organizations have brought Seattle's tree ordinance to the Growth Management Hearing Board and said, please help us send this back to the city to amend it so that it actually does protect trees. And so the hearing starts on February 15th at 9 a.m. You can go and listen on Zoom. It's going to be very wonky. All the tree people are going to be listening, but we hope to have a decision in April, and that would be a decision, we hope, where the state will say, Seattle, you're not going to meet your 30% goal, even if you're measuring at 8 feet. So anyway, there.
Yeah, and then the last one is one more petition or way to sign on. And actually, we have a flyer for it. We have an online petition on change.org, and it is to create a new Seattle Department of Climate and the Environment. It's what Sandy was speaking to earlier. We need a new department to manage trees. We know SDCI is ineffective. Even if we had a great tree ordinance, if we don't have effective enforcement, it's not going to really matter. This is a really easy way to get involved, because all you have to do is type in that link and put in your name, and I don't even think it asks for your email, and you won't get any emails or anything, and then you sign on to our petition, and we're trying to send it over to the city council, because we have a new Seattle City Council, and it seems like they're really open to talking about changing the current tree law and maybe creating a new Department of Climate and the Environment. So we think that there's a power in numbers, and if we show them that a lot of people want to affect change here, then they'll actually do something, and we'll get that new department that we desperately need, really, in our city. Actually, I'm going to introduce the next thing before I show it. It's a video from one of our volunteers who couldn't be here today, and it's of her grandchildren. Yeah, her grandchildren who said goodbye to a tree that she had in her backyard. They live on the East Coast, and she lives here in Seattle, and she wanted to highlight it because it really shows that they live in an area that's very densely built, and they saw that tree and they felt the need to say goodbye because they kind of knew what they were missing. They felt in touch with that tree, whereas it's really easy to take for granted trees here in Seattle. I mean, if you look around, you do see a lot of trees, a lot of greenery, but it's important to know that we need to keep it, and it's being lost at a rapid rate. So I'm just going to show that quickly. Oh, it's right there. Okay. 1 second. Technical glitch. I'm gonna exit out of our video.
Ania, what are you doing all the way over there behind the tree?
She said, I like this tree.
So you're hugging the tree before we say goodbye. Wow. And I thought I was weird. I want to hug the tree.
a note that we need to protect what we love. Like we said in the beginning, trees are so beneficial for us. They're so beneficial for our climate, and really, we need them for our future if we're gonna to fight the environmental crisis that we're having right now. So I really hope that everyone takes away that there's little ways that we can get involved and have action to support this community and grow it so we can protect our trees and protect our future. And I will leave it for questions.
It would be great to have the lights up so we can see each other during this part. So I'm June Spruce. I want to thank Julia and Sandy and Megan, and I want to thank the Howler Lake Community Club for welcoming us this evening, and to all of you for turning out. I'm June Blue Spruce. I'm the chair of the Trees and People Coalition. Our mission is to educate and engage all people to grow and protect trees in all Seattle communities. And I'm going to just talk for just a couple minutes. While I'm talking, if you would finish filling out writing down any questions you have on those little index cards. If you need pens, there's a bunch on the table over here.
And I can collect it and I'll go down the road.
Okay, great. If you could just kind of pass them over to where Julia is, that's awesome.
I can do this side, Jim.
Actually, Julia, give them to Pat and she'll sort them after you've collected them. Okay. The runaway mask. So I live in Southeast Seattle. I live about a mile from the beautiful 120-acre old-growth forest in Seward Park, which is one of my favorite places to hang out. I also live very close to some of Seattle's largest and most tree-deprived heat islands in the Rainier Valley and on Beacon Hill. So the contrast is really stark. I see evidence of environmental inequity every day. I am also a healthcare professional. I've worked in healthcare and public health for many decades, and way more decades than I would like to admit. And I am deeply interested in the significant physical, mental, and emotional health impacts of being around and living around trees. As I think Sandy said, you know, the benefits of a tree extend about 100 feet. So having them in parks is great, but we also need them where we live. So Julia talked about our petition. I hope that you'll visit the table over here where we have information. We have a sign-up sheet for our email list. And I also invite you to donate to our legal fund. And so take a look before you head out. I want to introduce a few more people here. We have some other wonderful volunteers from the Trees and People Coalition. Pat Hansen, you want to raise your hand, Pat? Pat is also a graphic designer who designed those beautiful postcards and the flyer for this event. Janet Way is also sitting at the table. Martha Baskin is in the audience. Martha, you want to raise your hand? And David is at the back table. He was already introduced. I'm sorry, what?
David's and his analysis of the project is detailed, and neighbors could look at it.
Yes, please take a look at what David has on his computer over there. It's a detailed analysis of the project that Sandy was talking about, and I think you'll find it really illuminating. David is a genius at making construction sites salvage the trees that are there instead of cutting them down. And it's amazing the creative work he's done. And Iskra has already been introduced and is here also to answer questions. So,
and another David is on the committee.
And David Glover. I'm sorry, David. Sorry about that. Yes, Dave works with the Trees and People Coalition and was a great volunteer helping set up. Thank you so much. So please pass your questions over to, do you have them now? You have one. You only have one question, that's not enough. You must have more questions than that.
Oh, we've got raise their hand. People want to raise.
Okay,
I'll
okay.
bring them up. Do you have a question?
Okay, okay.
I'll bring them.
What, I can't quite read this. What, something are we seeing from seeking?
relief
Oh, what
are we
relief?
seeking?
Sorry. So, it's the Growth Management Hearings Board, we're gonna have 3 members of the board in, as part of the hearing. And what we're asking them to do is to require the city to look back at the ordinance, to make amendments that will actually make it possible to reach a 30% tree canopy by 2037, and to study the ordinance to see if it's going to have a negative impact on the environment. David, did I get that right? Yeah, because they didn't update the determination of non-significance in terms of the environmental review, even though they changed the ordinance significantly. And we think it's going to have a strong environmental impact, but they never bothered finding out. Why wasn't the Urban Forestry Commission consulted with and listened to? Do we have someone who wants to answer that one?
Realtors.
Yeah. Thank you. Do you want to answer that?
Money. Yeah, I think I mentioned earlier about the lobbying, that there were 24 visits, private visits between the lobbyist for the Master Builders Association of King County and the different Seattle officials who were drafting the ordinance. And so that's where that broke down, that process. The Urban Forestry Commission was created for the express purpose of having subject matter experts give advice to the mayor and city council to craft tree management policy in the city. And they were ignored. You can actually go on their website. It's a Seattle City website if you just Google Urban Forestry Commission. And if you read their letters from last spring, they're really quite an indictment of the process. They say it'll have grave consequences. They had no time to review the ordinance. Their recommendations were not included in the ordinance. So I can't speak to all the behind the scenes stuff that resulted in that, but we do know that the process was skewed in favor of development, not in favor of subject matter experts. The Urban Forestry Commission has arborists and many other scientists on the commission.
Thank you. Does an urban heat island create more impact beyond the urban area? Great question. Does anyone know the answer to that question?
I mean, do you want to speak to that? I feel like we could just touch on the fact that
The urban heat islands, how we define an urban heat island is dependent on the surrounding area. So it's the temperature gradient between what the heat is like at this very place versus what is it like a mile away from there, but obviously on a much smaller differential. So by virtue of that, it is dependent on the surrounding areas. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I thought of something while you were talking. Yeah, so an urban heat island, as she said, it's the differential with what the non-built environment would be in that ecosystem. So a Las Vegas heat island is different than a Seattle urban heat island. It's the difference that the pavement and buildings make. So it's really almost a proxy for development. And the other big thing about urban heat islands is that they kill trees. They harm people and they kill trees. So when we talk about trying to plant our way out of an urban heat island, it's very difficult to get trees to start growing in an urban heat island, even when you are selecting species that are more hardy for heat. It's an extremely inhospitable environment for many reasons. Pollution, it's just very hard to undo that kind of damage once you start covering the ground with pavement. It's also very expensive to undo an urban heat island. It's much easier to avoid having one in the first place.
oh yeah, we have another question over here.
She was just saying, she was saying that she felt that the urban heat island impact would be wider than the island itself because it weakens the larger ecosystem. Is that what you, yeah, and that makes sense to me. I just want to say that the new ordinance allows developers to cover a lot with 85% hardscape. That means cement buildings, and that leaves no room for any tree of any size. And in some instances, in some types of zoning, it's 100%. Yeah. So other questions? Do we have more cards? Or are there more questions you want to just, yeah, go ahead. You wanna come up and-
A couple questions. One is, Alex Peterson was a community council member. He was my council member, and I got to know him pretty well, and we miss him. And the next question obviously is there anybody in the current council who's been stepping in this
So the question had to do with the dynamics on the council, because Alex Peterson, up until we had this election just now, was the only council member who supported trees. He voted against the ordinance. He was the lone vote against this ordinance. And he's quoted frequently because he analyzed it very thoroughly and knew the damage that it would do. The good thing is that because of the things that happened with Luma, and I almost think also because of how damaging this tree ordinance is, it really served as a wake-up call this past summer. People couldn't believe it when I told them what was in the ordinance, and then they look for themselves and it's like, oh my gosh, yes, we cannot have this in our city. So the good thing about that is it became a campaign issue. So we went to a lot of forums with the candidates all throughout the fall. Even when we didn't bring up tree issues, it always came up in the audience. It was not number one. Public safety was always number one, and homelessness usually was number two, but trees often came three. And so because of that, all of the council members who are new are definitely attuned to the need for the tree ordinance to be revised. And the existing land use committee is led by Tammy Morales and Vice Chair Dan Strauss. They did support the ordinance in its original form, so they will probably need some convincing, but I'm hoping that there's enough momentum that they will see that this needs to be done.
Yeah, sure, great. Where do non-native or invasive trees fit into canopy cover in the new ordinance? I'm just going to say that I won't talk about invasive trees, but I know that there are some non-native trees that provide significant tree canopy in Seattle. And so, we can't cut down all of the non-native trees, but we do, the city does try to control invasive trees, yeah.
Yeah, there's the only tree that's truly invasive is the tree of heaven. You've probably heard about that, and so that one is actively removed when it pops up or is planted. Most of Seattle, I shouldn't say, Seattle's known as being a tree zoo because there's so many different kinds of trees that are not native that people plant in their yards, and many of them do very well. But we just have to be careful. We want to favor our native trees, but it's hard for our native trees to grow, especially in our hottest neighborhoods. And then finally, we have to be careful because there are like two species of trees, Norway maples and horse chestnuts. Those are all throughout our city. They provide tons of our canopy. That's the cathedral of trees, excuse me. Excuse me, I have something on my Sorry. Anyway, sorry you guys. So it's not emotions, it's just some tickling thing in my throat. But anyway, we cannot remove all of our non-native trees. We need to keep all the trees we have.
We have another question. How does the loss of trees and the new ordinance affect climate change? Who wants to take this one?
Big question.
I mean, I can just say we know that from everything we've seen on the slides that trees are one of our most effective mitigations of climate change. Iskra, do you want to come up and answer that?
So I think it's important not to talk about the tree ordinance in a vacuum, because we have a legislative emergency. So the comprehensive plan is coming. We have the missing middle legislation, which was passed statewide. It will go into effect throughout the state as soon as the cities finish their comprehensive plans. The city is slow walking the comprehensive plan. We don't know exactly why. The state legislation is now pending that could put in something called a builder's remedy. So if the cities don't pass their comprehensive plan about growth management, the builder's remedy will allow the builders to build whatever they want. Then you have over here the tree ordinance, which is our local protection. It's a very complicated constellation. The one thing that's the most approachable and easy for us in Seattle is to immediately write to our new city council people. And we'll provide a very coherent list of bullet points on the website to say, make this a priority, do this now. Because if the city does not have an ordinance in place, it's going to be completely steamrolled. So I wanted to bring up something about the hypocrisy of a city that calls itself green, environmental, and emerald, and is pushing housing strategies that are the exact opposite. June brought up the word equity, and one of the things that pains me the most as a person who's lived here my whole life is how misused the word and the idea of equity is being used in the conversation around density. So a lot of why people are saying, I can't object, I'm not going to object to the density, is that people are being told, if you have a house and a tree in a yard, you're privileged and you're depriving other people of trees, and you all have to take your fair share of apartments. That is not going to help Beacon Hill not have a heat island. What will help Beacon Hill or South Seattle or South Park not be hot is to plant trees and to do development down there that's affordable and that can have gardens in it. More and more studies are coming out that show that the actual yardscapes and the trees in our neighborhoods are providing more protection from global warming than parks. So I'm an artist and I love architecture, and there's so much missed opportunity that we already have models for in our city. I spent 8 years living in a beautiful co-op brick apartment on, I think it was 18th Avenue. And all through that part of the city, you have these gorgeous canopies of trees. It's cool in the summer. There's trees, there's birds, there's bees. The whole thing is an ecosystem created by all those yards. You also have density, and it's all on the corners. And this is a very, very feasible way to get a lot more density in the cities without destroying an actual ecosystem of a neighborhood. So the Chesterfield was 4 stories. We had about 34 or 40 people living in it. But then you had yards. It was like a vast park that would go 2 more blocks. Oh, and then you have another apartment house on a corner. So corner development keeps neighbors from having their privacy taken away. It doesn't take the light away except from the person right next to the building. Instead, the city's not thinking creatively. They're handing it all over to the developers. And so what you get is in the middle of a block, and I wrote a big article about this and went around the city documenting this, you get 1 8-plex or 6-plex or 4-plex in the middle of a block. It looms tall. No one wants to live next to it. Those neighbors sell out, and then you get an absolutely treeless block. And then you get water infrastructure problems. So how many people here have heard of the Salty Dog Studios? It's one of the most venerable, fabulous, funky art studios in Seattle and Ballard. Well, with the big new rains that we're having, it was massively flooded, and they had to do a GoFundMe. The city never thought about the water structure underneath all that density and all that hardscaping. This is going to come to every neighborhood. I mean, already, all throughout the city. Like I grew up in the Central District, and you have Spring Street. Well, that's because there's a spring. People's basements flood even now. You add massive hardscaping in apartments, you're going to have more flooding. So all these things are connected, and it can be overwhelming. The place to start is with writing to the city council about the tree ordinance. And if you want to get more involved in the politics, it would be fantastic to have more people write letters. We need to really turn the dialogue around and ask our legislators to think creatively, and not misuse the language of equity in the way that it's being done. Because it should be a good thing to value living with a tree next to your house. That should be a human value. That shouldn't be considered demonized. That's a good thing. Any questions about
Okay, I just want to say that if you go to the Master Builders Association of Seattle and King County website, you'll see all the right words. You'll see equity, you'll see green, you'll see environmental, you'll see beautiful photos. And look what they're actually doing. Okay. What about the suggestion to plant coastal redwoods, which will be more able to survive climate warming as proposed by Propagation Nation?
I love coastal redwoods. The only problem with planting coastal redwoods in Seattle is that there is no space for them. I would love to see that we would make space for them with this more creative design like David advocates for. Right now, they're not allowed to, of course, be planted as street trees. And with the new lot coverage guarantees, as she was talking about, the 85% lot coverage guaranteed on a 5,000 square foot lot leaves a 2.5 foot strip around the building. So you can't plant a coastal redwood in that much space. So the key here is that even on sites that have no trees, is that we design in a way that leaves open soil so that future trees can grow. And I would love them to be coastal redwoods.
I want to say that if you have a big enough yard, you can still plant a coastal redwood in your yard. And that the Trees for Neighborhoods program, I don't know if it applies up here.
It does.
But in the south end where I live, we can get free trees from the Trees for Neighborhoods program, and they sometimes have redwoods, but you have to have enough space for them. They're very careful to make sure. Yeah, Janet.
Yeah, can I, would you mind if I speak? No, not at all. Watersheds? Not at all.
I want to make sure, please make sure if you have.
Hi, everybody. My name's Janet Way. I'm a longtime activist on watersheds, especially Thornton Creek. And what I found recently with this tree ordinance and SDCI is that they're making every possible excuse to kind of ignore or push to the side the critical areas. Everybody know what's a critical area? Steep slopes, wetlands, creeks, and there's other potential critical areas. So they're pushing the edge on that. They're saying, well, it's not really a steep slope because one time it was altered. Or they're saying, oh, this little creek, or they don't even want to call it a creek. They call it drainage. And we're going to de-water the site. And so it's very dangerous what's going on. And I'm concerned that even at the state house, the state legislature, and the state senate, they're getting pressured by developers to basically, push back on these critical area ordinances. And the critical area ordinance are there for public safety, for habitat protection, for salmonids, especially, which are supposed to be protected no matter what. But they're still getting away with it. And the thing is, if people don't understand what's at risk with the development, then the only way to protect these resources is for us, for the people, to actually stand up for it. And so, so if you know of one in your neighborhood, a steep slope or a wetland or a creek, by all means, raise hell. And that's we've done it, right, Ruth? The Thornton Creek watershed, we daylighted Thornton Creek, y'all. Right. And so, in that case, we didn't save any trees. We planted a whole lot of trees because it was just a parking lot. But there's things you can do. But the development pressure is very intense now from and it's really sad, because builders, they're good people, most of them. They're just craftsmen. They're really good architects. They're all talented people who know how to do stuff. Right now, the remodeling show's at the convention center, and I love those guys. They're great. They know how to do stuff, But there's this kind of political conspiracy of the master builders and others that work together, and they're just pushing. So I just urge everybody to push back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janet. Any other questions? That would be a great rousing speech to end on. Is that the right? Are there any other questions that we haven't answered? Feel free to buttonhole any of us in this last few minutes, and I want to say thank you again so much for being here with us and for being so.
Thanks to all of our speakers.